Well, the Kabuki theater is in full effect when it comes to Tim Walz's completely fraudulent and made up attempt to do anything whatsoever on the issue of gun control or school safety. And the cat is out of the bag. The mask has been taken off as of today. So, there was a meeting that took place between Governor Tim Walz and legislative leadership today, earlier this morning. And at that meeting, it was made very clear that Democrats are done trying to engage in a good faith legislative process, and they're taking this to the press. And indeed, there were two press conferences that took place today, one by Republicans and the other by Democrats here in the state of Minnesota. And so this is now a full-fledged air war in the media in order to craft political narratives. And of course, that was the intention, that was the point the whole time. Like, no good faith effort was ever made by this governor to try to actually engage in anything remotely resembling a legitimate legislative process operating in good faith under both our rules and custom and usage and the general expectations that a normal person would have about how the legislative process of our representative government is supposed to work. And so, one of the things that is being cited, and I read an article today from the Minnesota Reformer that lifted up this statistic, is that 60+% of Minnesotans want to see an assault weapons ban. The interesting thing about that claim is that it comes from polling that was conducted by Everytown. Everytown is a gun control lobbying organization. So, I wonder, what was their methodology? What kind of questions did they ask? What sort of options? Was it like a multiple choice of which of these policy solutions would you be interested in? I think we all know the answer. A significantly more reliable poll came from KSTP, and that one indicated the following. Turns out that 67% of Minnesotans believe that our top issues, which include mental health, criminal penalties, and school safety, should be the top focus of a special session, compared to just 30% who think that gun control is the answer in the wake of the Annunciation Catholic School shooting. Bizarre that. That's what, like a 30% difference from the Everytown poll? I wonder which one is more accurate. I wonder which one is less biased. This is the environment that we're operating in. And so what I want to do is, I have not watched either of these press conferences. We're going to watch them together. I'm going to give you a live reaction, live response to these dueling press conferences. This is where we're at right now, where instead of having conversations about what the solutions are, what bills could potentially pass in a special session, everybody's taken to the mics and to the cameras to put on a show. Not particularly productive, does nothing for the people of Minnesota, does nothing to keep our children safe, but that's what Governor Tim Walz's leadership has driven us to. So let's take a listen to these two press conferences and react in real time.
We've heard that the governor is going to be calling a special session. The idea behind that, as he has shared, is due to the tragedy that happened at Annunciation School and Church in that community. And what I'd like to tell you today is, again, as all of you know, the governor is the only person in the state that can call a special session. We are waiting for the governor to do that. I have been in meetings for the last probably 2 weeks on and off, the four leaders and the governor, and we've been in those conversations. And today, our meeting was very brief. We, as you saw in the public, the Democrats had put forward parameters that would have really silenced the voice of the legislature to get work done in a special session. I returned an idea, kind of a broad framework that just reiterates, again, Governor, when you call that special session, as you know, House Republicans will show up. We will be there to work. We are fully invested in the work that needs to happen. We will do that. We also want to give the legislature the full process to hear bills, vet bills, and have them go through the committee process. In the House specifically, we are tied, and so anything that goes through both the committee process or that gets passed off the House floor will need to be bipartisan. We've already done that work throughout this entire year in the legislature, and that would continue even with the topics at hand. That means any member would be able to introduce a bill. They would be referred to committee, and then the committees would take their process. That is what we put forward to the governor today, what I had put forward to him, and just saying we want that legislative process to work. Again, the governor is the only one who can call a special session. We stand ready to fully participate in the legislative process. The legislature is the only body that can pass bills, and then, of course, the governor could either sign or veto bills. But that's where we stand today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Leader Harry Niska.
Thank you. Well, it's become clear, I think, to everyone what should have been obvious from the start, that the governor's talk of a special session has been a partisan political stunt from the beginning. Unfortunately, he has not been interested, or it's not acted as if he's interested in finding bipartisan solutions to the problem of school safety, the problem of public safety, the problem of mental health, but has instead been trying to demand something that's really, frankly, bizarre in the history of special sessions in Minnesota. The idea that Democrats who wouldn't even give certain bills hearings when they had the majority now want to fast track those bills through without actually even releasing what the language of those bills would be, but try to fast track those through in a special session. Normal special sessions are either things that have broad bipartisan support or things where there's been a legislative process that almost got done before there was a need for a special session. This isn't anything like that. Republicans have been have made clear that we're open to serious bipartisan solutions when it comes to school safety, when it comes to public safety, when it comes to mental health, and now it's clear that the governor really isn't interested in that. He's really just interested in trying to politicize a really horrible tragedy, and that is really unfortunate for the state of Minnesota, the lack of leadership from his corner. We'll take questions.
All right, so before they take questions, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Speaker Lisa Demuth and Leader Harry Niska, for saying what needs to be said in this moment. That is 100% accurate. And I imagine when we shift over to revealing the Democrat or live reacting to the Democrat press conference, by contrast, what you're going to hear is a lot of obfuscation, a lot of redactions, a lot of missing context, a lot of conflation and smoke show in order to prevent you from realizing or recognizing what these two just outlined, which is that there is, in fact, a distinction between how a special session works and how the regular session works, right? Like, a special session doesn't exist for the purpose of the governor announcing that he's going to do something and then just strong-arming every elected representative and senator in the state into doing whatever it is that he says. That's not why we have special sessions. The reason we had a special session back in June was in order to complete the work that we had conducted in the regular session, and that was work where bills were introduced by legislators, they were heard in committee, they were vetted, they were negotiated upon between co-chairs in the House. They went through the process in both chambers, and we just hadn't quite gotten to a final agreement as to what should ultimately pass. And then entering into that special session, which only took one day, the reason it only took one day is because there was a written agreement up front that said, these are the things we're going to pass. These are the things we're going to get done. That's how special sessions typically work. They're not just a means to shove through some random demand from the executive. They're a means to finish work that has been all but completed in the regular session, typically. Now, there's a couple of exceptions to that, right? Like if we needed to have like emergency funding after a natural disaster or something along those lines, then you might call a special session at an odd time of year, such as right now. But under those circumstances, the way you would pursue it is, if you had any sort of civic responsibility as an executive whatsoever, you would work with legislative leadership in order to develop what that package looks like and get agreement upon it before going into a special session so that you could suspend the rules and make sure that that gets passed. Nothing even remotely close to that has even been offered here. Instead, we have Governor Walz demanding that we pass legislation that he couldn't get passed under his trifecta. In fact, as leadership points out here, couldn't even get committee hearings on some of these bills that Tim Walz is insisting that we're going to have a special session on in a divided legislature now and pass, and those are the only circumstances under which he's going to agree to call it. And then somehow it's our fault for saying, wait a minute, that's not how this process works. Like, if you want to bring up a novel idea or an idea that was previously rejected by your own side, then yeah, we're going to go through the regular process. We're going to have it introduced. We're going to hear it in committee, if the chairs agree to even hear it, and we're going to vet it, and we're going to debate it, and we're going to go through the same type of process that would happen during a regular session. It's literally all that Republicans are saying is, hey, if you want to do this, cool. You want to call us back in to engage in the legislative process? Let's engage in the legislative process. But what we're not going to do is just surrender our responsibility as representatives of the people who elected us to vet, deliberate, debate, and determine what the best policy actually is in this moment. And the level of disingenuousness on display here by the Walz administration, by Governor Walz himself personally, is off the charts. So let's see what sorts of questions our illustrious legacy media has for House Republican leadership.
What did that include? What did that not include?
Again, yes, I did send something over to the governor's office, and it included the fact that the governor is the only one that can call that special session. Bills will be introduced. Determinations would be made if we would go that far as any spending that would take place. That could be discussions and decisions made by the four leaders. Bills will make their way through the process and then be able to be voted on, whether it's in committee or on the House floor. It was just very basic of how the legislature actually works. And to Leader Niska's point, I think it's important to recognize the work that we did when we returned on June 9th for a one-day special session. That work had already been fully vetted all the way through the entire legislative session. Bills were introduced, they were discussed. As you know, we have co-chairs in every committee. That was already worked on. This is a very unique situation that we can handle, but it needs to fully be vetted through the legislative process in order to get the work done in a bipartisan way.
I know you've said that you need to see language around any kind of gun restrictions before you can take a stance, but is there any world where you would even consider like a restriction or any kind of, ban on an assault type weapon?
Well, I think what's clear, and what I think the media has been clear in reporting, is that there's not any sort of language along those lines that has majority support in either house, in either the House or the Senate. In fact, from a lot of reporting, it sounds like anything along those lines would have bipartisan opposition in the Senate, which is currently down 2 members already. And so Democrats, I think, would maybe be at 30 or maybe 31 votes in the Senate on whatever configuration of that language is, which I think is why the governor hasn't actually put out any specific proposal that even could be heard or could have hearings about. I think another important thing to remember is, even though bills like that have been introduced, even when Democrats had the majority, they didn't even bother having committee hearings on those bills. So what the governor is asking for is that we just pass bills that A, haven't been written yet, and B, have never had committee hearings, and skip past the entire legislative process, ignore the voice of all of the other legislators, all of their districts, and just skip straight to the end based on demands that he's making to leadership. That's never been the way we govern in Minnesota. It's not the right way to govern in Minnesota, and really it's just political posturing by the governor, and which is a really unfortunate way to handle a tragedy that we should be able to come together and find some solutions on.
Yeah, and again, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Is the absurdity of this scenario where the ideas that are being forwarded by Governor Walz are ideas that his own side won't support. They won't support them today, and they didn't support them when they had the trifecta. The idea that this is a good faith effort to try to do something serious in response to Annunciation, in response to the environment that we find ourselves in with this escalating political violence, it's just so categorically absurd. And I'll be frank, it's deeply frustrating to hear reporters from the legacy media ask questions that very clearly have the intent of trying to set up Republicans to say, well, we're not willing to do anything. When we very much are. We have very specific proposals for how to directly address school safety, mental health, criminal accountability. And what you see happening here is the redaction of all of that, the funneling of the conversation where, no, the only thing we could possibly talk about is an assault weapons ban. That's it. That's the only thing that's on the table. It's the only thing that's worthy of conversation. It's the only possible solution. That's the only thing we could talk about. That's the premise under which the current public discourse is operating, and that premise is categorically absurd. That is not how you solve problems. You don't solve problems by, at the outset, completely writing off any number of potential ways to address the problem and then comparing their effectiveness. Which one of these offered solutions is actually going to have the effect of making our schools safer?
So you only control your caucus. So, you heard from the Annunciation parents, they want an assault weapons ban, a high capacity magazine ban. Does your caucus support anything even close to what they're asking for?
I don't think that there are any Republican House votes in favor of those kind of proposals, but it's, again, you have to actually have bill language, you have to have hearing on a bill in order to see whether there is some place where those things can come together. But the other states that have done that are A, tied up in legal challenges, and B, haven't really seen results that would suggest that that's a real solution to the problem.
Leader Niska, you told one of our reporters that you wouldn't let a bill, an assault weapons bill, even come to the floor. So how can you talk me through how that is transparent in the way that you're asking for?
I said I was not going to vote for putting that bill on the floor in the Rules Committee, and I believe I said I hadn't asked the other members of the Rules Committee how they would vote. But I did. But I do think it's unlikely that would come through the Rules Committee.
Is your guys' understanding that a special session will be happening at this point with or without your support? Like, is that going to be called? Is that announcement imminent? And if so, how might that work logistically with the makeup of the legislature?
So again, the governor is the only one that can call the special session. If he chooses to do that, or when he does, House Republicans will be there. We will not deny quorum in the House. That is something that we will not do. House Republicans show up and we do the hard work for Minnesotans. So if he chooses to call it, or when he chooses to call it, we will be there ready to work. Any other questions? Yes.
Just in the outline of the proposal the governor gave, do you see parts where there's a lot of agreement between parties and in other proposals there?
You know what, as far as the proposal that made its way out to the media out of a closed-door 4-leader governor meeting, multiple meetings, I think that questions for that should best be directed to them.
Let me say what Speaker Dameth feels like she can't, for whatever reason. This is not a good faith negotiation, right? This is not how you negotiate an actual legislative solution. When you need votes, when you need people to put votes up on the board in order to pass something, what you don't do is sour those negotiations by releasing proposals that have not been agreed to and letting the media go on the frenzy that they're currently doing in this Q&A. That is not a good faith legislative negotiating tactic. That's not how you win friends and influence people. But of course, the goal isn't to win friends and influence people. The goal is to leverage the legislative process to abuse our legislative resources that are paid for by your state tax dollars in order for Governor Walz to campaign for a third term, and in order for House Democrats and Senate Democrats to campaign. That's it. That's what they're doing. They are taking a process that is meant for deliberation of public policy, and they are perverting it into a stage for their 2026 campaign. And listen, as I've said in the past, it is not unusual. The politicizing of the legislative process is obviously not a novel concept, right? But in a regular session, it's different. Because in a regular session, to the extent that parliamentary moves are made or opportunities to speak are taken in order to engage in naked politics, It's part of an ongoing process of deliberation that ultimately results in bills that get passed. In this case, it's not. In this case, there's no pathway. There's no way that anything productive is going to result from this smoke show. All right, so just to clarify a couple of things here is what the governor's trying to do. He's violating the separation of powers. He's trying to dictate what the legislative process will look like in the House and the Senate. He's saying, I want you to agree to this list of things that you're going to do, and we're not going to consider any of the other things that you guys might want to do. Well, I'm sorry. I have an election certificate. I represent 40,000 plus Minnesotans who elected me to go down to St. Paul and to author legislation and to advocate for it. They didn't elect you to determine what the laws of this state are going to be. They elected me and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to determine what the laws of the state of Minnesota are going to be. I operate under no obligation to concede to your executive branch that legislative responsibility. And so if you have not engaged in the necessary good faith negotiation to arrive at an agreement as to what the items that would be passed in a special session would be, you are entitled to precisely nothing. Nothing. You're entitled to precisely nothing. You don't get to have what you want because you want it. This is the type of conversation I have to have with my children, but now I'm having it with the governor of the state of Minnesota. You don't get to have what you want because you really, really want it really bad. That's not how this works. I know you think you're a king, right? You acted like one in 2020. You unilaterally shut down our entire lives, pressed your thumb on the development of our children over completely fake science. So I know you think you're a king, but guess what? You're not. You don't get what you want because you want it. This legislative process is a responsibility that we hold because we actually take our oaths to the Constitution of the state of Minnesota seriously. We actually take our obligation to listen to our constituents seriously. This isn't Kabuki theater for us. This isn't a stage for campaigning for us. This is the work. This is the reason why we were sent to St. Paul in the first place, to actually do what our people expect us to do. We're not here as pawns in your game, Governor Walz. And listen, not to mention the fact that you've just been listening to Speaker Lisa Dameth, Republican, in charge of the House. She earned that. She earned that in a couple of different ways. First, in breaking your trifecta, and second, by successfully negotiating the complete cluster that you guys engaged in after getting caught in cheating in an election with Curtis Johnson. And so guess what? You're going to have to deal with her. And you're going to have to deal with us. We're in charge of the House. Period. We're in charge of the parliamentary procedure. We're in charge of the order. We're in charge of who gets recognized. We're in charge of all of it. And that is not going to get yielded to you in order to further your campaign. Now let's listen to what I'm sure is going to be a fair and balanced and completely sane and rational press conference from my colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle. Let's take a listen.
Good afternoon. This morning, Leader Murphy, myself, the governor, put out a offer in good faith to our Republican colleagues to have a special session to address the gun violence we've been seeing across the state and across the country in recent days. That offer included provisions that we feel very strongly about, that the community feels very strongly about, that the families feel very strongly about, including banning assault weapons and banning high-capacity magazines. We also reached across the aisle and picked up some ideas that our Republican colleagues have been saying are important to them, because we do recognize in order to pass any meaningful gun violence prevention measures through the legislature, we will need votes from both Democrats and Republicans. So we came to the table in good faith and put out an offer that we thought addressed all of those issues. But I'm feeling discouraged after listening to my Republican colleagues just now, because I hear on the one hand that we need to have an open process where all legislators can be involved. And in the very same press conference, I heard Leader Niska say that there wasn't a single Republican vote for an assault weapons ban and that he wasn't even going to bring it to the floor. That's not an open process. But it is the truth that there isn't Republican support for these gun bills. And I think Minnesotans have the answer that they've been looking for about what the Republican position is on guns, that they're not even willing to have a vote on the floor, on the merits, on these very important issues. And that's deeply disappointing to me. It's deeply disappointing to my caucus, our caucus, which has done incredible work in recent years on gun violence. We passed universal background checks.
All right, so he's giving away the store. Zach, you're not good at this. You're not. I hate to break it to you. You're terrible at this. You just gave away the store. You gave away your entire plan. All right? So clearly, the entire intention of this theatrical process is to be able to make the claim that Republicans aren't willing to do anything specifically on guns, which ignores 2 points. Number one, we have no obligation to be willing to consider gun control legislation. That is not an obligation that we have. Just like you, as a chair of a committee previous to your current role, like, you know how this works. Don't pretend you don't know how the legislative process works. Okay? As a chair of a committee, you reject far more bills than you actually hear. Does that mean that you're not for an open and transparent process, that you're not willing to engage in good faith because there's literally thousands of bills that you don't hear in your committee? Is that what that means? Is that the premise that you're operating under? Or do you actually have in your role, both as an elected representative and as somebody who has been assigned to chair a committee, a prerogative to exercise discretion on what ideas you're willing to hear, what ideas you're willing to consider? Now, you know the answer to that question. Every single one of your colleagues in both chambers knows the answer to that question. And everybody in the state of Minnesota knows the answer to that question. We're not stupid. All right? So you're just a liar, clearly, right? Like you are attempting to portray an institutional reality that does not exist. That in order to operate in good faith and in order to be willing to have a conversation, you have to be willing to take up propositions that you're fundamentally opposed to. Okay, like you can go on my page right now, Zach, my legislative page in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I think I've authored, something like 150 bills. How many of them did you hear? Oh, well, that must be because you're not engaging in good faith. You're not for open dialogue. You're not for the process. Right? Like, you're not even willing to consider my ideas. So that makes you a terrible person. That's literally what you just said about us. No, what it is that you look at my bills and you say, this is a terrible idea, and utilizing my legislative discretion that I have both as somebody with an election certificate and somebody who chairs a committee, I don't want to hear that bill, right? That's point number one. Point number two, clearly the only thing you're looking to get out of this process is the ability to stand in front of a camera and stand in front of a microphone and say what you're saying right now. Oh, Republicans don't want to do anything about guns. Fact of the matter is, there's plenty we'd like to do about guns. For instance, we would like to actually punish gun crimes. Rather than the people on your side who want to send convicted gun criminals into hugging circles to talk it out, we want them to be in prison. We want to take guns off the street. More specifically, we want to take the people who would illegally and illegitimately use guns off the street. And that's something you won't hear. That's something you won't consider. That's something you won't bring to the table. Why, Zach? Is it because you don't believe in the process and you're not engaging in good faith? Give me a break.
Red flag laws that we know are saving lives. There was a great report in the Star Tribune just this week documenting how many successful cases of red flag laws have been passed in recent years. Though every time that happens, we're saving lives and preventing gun violence. We want to build upon that work. We want to do the work that Minnesotans expect of us. We want to do the work that the families expect of us. But it's unfortunate that our Republican colleagues don't share that resolve. So I'm feeling discouraged today, but still resolute. We're going to not give up. We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to make sure that we, at some point in the future, pass these measures because that's what Minnesotans want.
So you had the opportunity 23 and 24. In 2023 and 2024, you had a trifecta. You could pass literally anything you wanted, and you didn't pass this. Why? I mean, you're talking about your resolve. How much resolve could you possibly have in regards to these proposals if, when you had total control of state government, you didn't do it? How much resolve could you possibly be holding on to? Could you possibly be motivated by when you had the opportunity and you didn't do it? That is not an indication of resolve. That's an indication that in this moment, you're lying. You're performing. You're putting on a show. And you're doing it at taxpayer expense, utilizing legislative resources, not with any intention of actually getting anything done, but with the goal of saying what you just said, making a political point that you can carry over into the 2026 campaign. And listen, I don't begrudge anybody for campaigning. I'm going to campaign the hell out of you guys next year. But what I resent is you utilizing official resources in order to do it. You gaming the official legislative process, not for the intention of actually accomplishing anything at all that's going to make even one child safer in the state of Minnesota, but in order to have moments like this, where you can come before the press and say, oh, Republicans just don't want to do anything to keep your kids safe. That is reprehensible, and you should be ashamed. Let's see if Aaron Murphy does any better.
Good afternoon. I am glad to be with my fellow leader, Zach Stevenson, and with Governor Walz in our determination to bring to the legislature in a special session a suite of measures that we believe will impact and improve the lives of people and keep our kids and our communities safe from gun violence. And we believe we cannot do that without legislation dealing with guns. And so with work over the course of a series of meetings, we did put together a proposal that we believed would meet with bipartisan support, would also achieve the goal that we need right now, which is compromise.
On what basis did you think for even a second that proposals that you couldn't get one party support for in 23 and 24 would end up having bipartisan support in 2025? Why am I asking these questions? Like, we'll get to the Q&A, and again, this is the first time I'm watching this, but I guarantee you there isn't a single reporter who's going to ask the question that I just asked. Under what expectation could you possibly think that you're going to have bipartisan support for proposals that you couldn't even get your own party to vote for or hear in committee when you were in total control of everything?
And I think in this legislature particularly, in a divided, so closely divided legislature, we can't just look for bipartisanship. When we have to solve our most difficult issues, and let's say that keeping our kids safe from gun violence in schools is a difficult issue in this legislature right now. I don't understand why, but it is a difficult issue politically in this legislature right now.
I can tell you exactly why. You want to know why, Aaron? I'll tell you exactly why it's a difficult issue. Because you've hamstrung it and you've funneled it down to one thing that is irrelevant. And that is my capacity to defend my family. You think that the solution to some Looney Tune shooting up a church or a school is to take away my capacity to defend my family from the Looney Tunes who you sick on me. That's your premise. And it is literally the only premise you're willing to entertain. Now, how do I know this? For a fact, for an undeniable, irrefutable fact. Well, because there's something called the SHIELD Act. It was authored by my friend and colleague on the Republican side of the aisle in the House, Representative Elliott Engen. What does it do? Well, it provides grants to school districts who want to install systems in their facilities that will fortify those schools. And not in like a militaristic prison sense. Like, we're not going to turn the schools into prisons. But what it does is, at the push of a button, boom, 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 boom. Assailant ain't going anywhere. Assailant is going to be pepper sprayed. Assailant is going to be marked to where if they escape, there'll be little footprints in the grass as they walk away so law enforcement can track them down. There'll be ballistic shields to protect our students. Now, this proposal, which makes obvious logical sense and would immediately solve the problem, which I suspect is why you won't entertain it, because solving the problem isn't your goal. Your goal is to perpetuate the problem so that you can continue to campaign on it, which is abhorrent. You're willing to risk the lives of children in order to maintain a campaign issue. That is the mark of beasts, not good faith human beings who deserve to be taken seriously. That is a horrific position to be coming from. And how do I know that's true? Because this bill, authored by Elliott Engen, was endorsed. It got a letter of support from guess who? You'll never guess. Moms Demand Action, the local chapter here in Minnesota. Turns out that one of these moms, one of these ladies, is actually operating in good faith and actually cares about the safety of her children. And she looked at this proposal and she thought to herself, my Lord, this is fantastic. This is how I keep my babies safe. And so she signed off on it. She provided a letter to Representative Engen in support of it. You know what happened after that? She got her leash yanked by national Moms Demand Action and by Democrats. And you know what their rationale was for why they didn't want to keep your children safe? The rationale was Elliott Engen is in what was, now it so much is not after the high performance that he had in the last election, but what was considered a swing district. And by God, we can't have a freshman Republican House member get a win legislatively when we need to take that district back in 2024. So let's just put the brakes on this idea that will save kids' lives. Let's just do that. Let's put the brakes on something that will shield children from being murdered by insane people so that we can win an election. That's who we're dealing with here right now. That's who the Democrats are. Public Safety Chair Kelly Moeller, and this is anecdotal, can't confirm it, but I believe it, utilized that exact logic to justify not hearing Engen's SHIELD Act in her committee when she was the chair in 23 and 24. We can't let Engen have a legislative win. Does that sound like people who are interested in keeping your kids safe to you? Does that sound like people who are engaged in good faith? They're not. And the sooner you wake up to this, the sooner you realize that this is not, we are not dealing with loyal opposition here. All right? These are not folks who are interested in trying to pursue the best public policy in order to affect the best outcomes for the state of Minnesota. Look at the fraud. Look at the fraud that they've done nothing to rein in. Certainly nothing effective when you have 2 weeks ago the U.S. attorney coming out and saying, I could keep 1,000 prosecutors busy, but I only have 5 working on it. Your Medicaid waiver programs are basically just fraud programs. Well, who the hell set that up? Who's maintained it? Who sustained it? And why? The Democrat Party needs to be rescued, because not everybody in it, not everybody in these caucuses in either the House or the Senate are as insane as the stuff you're hearing from their leaders right now, or from Governor Walz. How do I know that? Well, because, they won't tell you publicly, but they'll tell me in a shady booth in a restaurant somewhere in St. Paul that they know their side is crazy, that they abhor how radical their party has become. And so what needs to happen is, you want to campaign, let's campaign. Let's get after it. That's what all this is about, right? Campaigning. Let's campaign. What needs to happen is the Democrat Party needs to be completely and utterly decimated in 2026. They need to lose so badly that their donors and those who remain have no choice but to look at the ashes upon which they stand and ask themselves, how did this happen? And past that point, our obligation as governing Republicans for the first time in this state in a very long time is not going to be to engage in Schadenfreude and to mock them and to say, ha, we won, you lost. That's not what we're going to do. It's not what I'm going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to say, yeah, sucks, don't it? Here's how you come back. Here's how you raise up within your ranks leaders who are going to restore loyal opposition. And, by the way, who are worthy of us being loyal opposition too, because you're going to take it back at some point, right? Like the pendulum swings. In order to have a healthy political discourse, in order to have a healthy public discourse, in order to have a healthy legislative process, it can't continue to be what it is now. What it is now is existential. What it is now is, if we don't win, they're going to crush our rights to protect our family, our rights to exercise our religion, our rights to freely associate, to speak freely. They're going to crush it. That's existential. Those stakes are dangerous. What it needs to be is a competition between parties, between candidates, toward liberty. I have the best idea to ensure that you can live your life according to your own values. No. I have a better idea than him as to how you can live your life according to your values and enjoy all the freedoms to which you're entitled under the American project. That's the back and forth. That's the future. Loyal opposition between the parties. And it ain't going to happen, as evidenced by all this Kabuki theater surrounding Annunciation, leveraging dead kids to affect Tim Walz's bid at a third gubernatorial term. Like, under those scenarios, that's not going to happen. He needs to lose. House Democrats need to lose. Senate Democrats need to lose. And they need to lose so big that they have no choice but to question the absurdity of engaging in this type of a process. And I believe it can happen. Why? Because you're listening to me right now. And voices like mine, with the ability to reach tens of thousands of people, to tell the truth, to pull back the curtain, to show you the wizard, they weren't platformed 2, 6, 10 years ago. All you had was the evening news. All you had was these journalists asking questions that have obviously been staged in order to put forward the pre-programmed Democrat narrative. Well, now we got a mic too. And the funny thing about having a mic when you're telling the truth is that people can recognize it. And they can recognize the lies in contrast.